to try and convey the impression that Ukraine is capable of carrying on the war, has great fight left in it, and is capable ultimately of harming Russia. I don't think the harm was very great. I think it's grossly exaggerated in the West. Anything you hear from the Western outlets, BBC, or any of the mainstream in the United States are probably untrue, or at least grossly exaggerated. What I think is true is that we damaged ourselves and our relationship, what there is left of it, with Moscow by attacking these bombers on the tarmac or the runway as a result of the strategic arms limitation agreements. And I think the Russians have reached a point now where collectively they all say we can't be trusted. Whatever we say is irrelevant because it's probably untrue. So I think that's the real fallout from this. We lost whatever lingering credibility we may have had with them for the foreseeable future.
You just heard Colonel Douglas Macgregor, former U.S. Army officer and decorated combat veteran, reacting to reports that Ukraine, backed by NATO and the United States, launched a drone strike over the weekend targeting Russian air bases deep inside Russia. Judge Andrew Napolitano asked him directly, did the United States and NATO attack Russia using drones from their proxy Ukraine? Macgregor's response was clear, yes, unquestionably. Now let's unpack what we're seeing here, not just in terms of military action, but in terms of policy, perception, and long-term consequences. According to initial Western reports, Ukrainian drones struck Russian military airfields in the Saratov and Ryazan regions, areas far from the front lines. These bases reportedly housed two 95 strategic bombers, aircraft capable of carrying nuclear weapons. The immediate narrative from Western outlets suggested that 40 to 50 Russian aircraft were destroyed or severely damaged. But as Macgregor pointed out, those numbers are almost certainly exaggerated. He calls it a PR stunt, designed to show the world that Ukraine is still in the fight, that its Western-backed military can strike deep into Russian territory, and that Moscow is vulnerable. But the reality? Based on available evidence and open-source intelligence, most analysts agree the damage was minimal, perhaps 4 to 7 aircraft affected at most, with many of them likely reparable. So why does this matter? Because in modern warfare, narrative is as important as firepower. What we're witnessing isn't just a war on the battlefield. It's also a war of information. As Macgregor bluntly stated, anything you hear from the Western outlets, BBC, or any of the mainstream in the United States are probably untrue or at least grossly exaggerated. That's a bold statement, but one worth taking seriously. Western media has consistently amplified Ukrainian successes while downplaying setbacks. This isn't new. Governments have long used media to shape public opinion during wartime. But what's different now is the level of coordination between governments and journalists, and how quickly false narratives can go viral through social media and mainstream platforms alike. This selective reporting creates a distorted view of the conflict, especially when it comes to assessing real military capabilities and outcomes. In contrast, Russian state media often provides overly optimistic claims as well. So neither side gives us a full picture. Which brings us back to the core question, what was the true objective of this strike? From a military standpoint, hitting Russian air bases thousands of kilometers behind the front line shows a growing capability on Ukraine's part, particularly with Western-supplied technology and intelligence support. But again, the scale of the damage doesn't match the hype. So if the goal wasn't major destruction, what was it? It seems more likely that this was a symbolic message to the Russian people, to Putin's inner circle, and to the world that Ukraine is not beaten yet. And perhaps more importantly, that the West remains fully committed to supporting Kiev's resistance, even at the risk of direct escalation with Russia. Douglas Macgregor raises a critical point about the strategic fallout of this attack, specifically how it undermines trust between the U.S. and Russia. He notes that these bombers are covered under arms control agreements, including the New START Treaty, and that attacking them on the ground could be seen as a violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of those accords. While the U.S. denies direct involvement, there's little doubt that American intelligence and satellite data played a role in enabling the strike. This blurs the line between proxy war and direct confrontation. And as Macgregor warns, this kind of action may push Russia further into a corner, making future diplomacy harder and increasing the chances of miscalculation. More than that, it erodes what little trust remains between Washington and Moscow. Russia now sees every Western promise, whether about NATO expansion, sanctions relief, or security guarantees, as suspect. And in a world where nuclear deterrence still matters, that loss of trust could prove extremely dangerous. We cannot ignore the wider geopolitical context. Russia is increasingly aligning itself with China, India, and other non-aligned nations. The BRICS bloc is expanding, and global South countries are watching closely how the West handles this conflict. Many see the Ukraine war not just as a regional issue, but as a symptom of a deeper struggle between unipolarity, U.S. dominance, and multipolarity, a balance of powers. To these nations, the U.S. appears to be choosing confrontation over cooperation, intervention over diplomacy, and regime change over peaceful coexistence. This perception weakens America's soft power globally, something Macgregor hinted at when he said the U.S. has lost credibility with Moscow. And once credibility is gone, rebuilding it becomes incredibly difficult. So where does this leave us? First, we must ask ourselves, is the goal of this war truly peace, or is it something else? Are we trying to secure Ukraine's sovereignty, or are we attempting to weaken Russia permanently? Because if the latter, then we should be honest about it and prepare for a long, costly, and potentially dangerous conflict. Second, we need to rethink how we approach information in wartime. If we cannot trust our own media to provide accurate, balanced reporting, then how can we make informed decisions? Third, we must consider the cost of losing diplomatic channels with Russia. Even in times of tension, dialogue is essential. Without it, we risk drifting toward catastrophe. In conclusion, the recent drone strikes on Russian air bases represent more than just another tactical move in the Ukraine war. They're a symbol of Western resolve, yes, but also a warning sign. A warning that we may be crossing red lines we didn't realize were there. A warning that our narratives may be shaping reality more than we want to admit. And a warning that in this new era of hybrid warfare, the greatest danger may not come from missiles, but from misunderstanding. Stay tuned for more analysis right here on The Informed Perspective. Until next time, stay informed and think critically. According to Douglas Macgregor, I think, for the most part, it was a PR stunt to try and convey the impression that Ukraine is capable of carrying on the war, still has a lot of fight left in it, and is ultimately capable of harming Russia. I don't think the harm was very great. I believe it's grossly exaggerated in the West. Anything you hear from Western outlets like the BBC or any of the mainstream media in the United States is probably untrue or, at the very least, highly exaggerated. What I think is true is that we damaged ourselves and what remains of our relationship with Moscow by attacking those bombers on the tarmac or the runway, especially in light of the strategic arms limitation agreements. And I think the Russians have now collectively reached the point where they say, we can't trust the West. Whatever they say is irrelevant because it's probably untrue. So I think that's the real fallout from this. We've lost whatever lingering credibility we may have had with them for the foreseeable future.